So first of all, thanks for joining. Really excited to be talking today about the 2018.2 Tableau Server release for Windows. This is a big one, the biggest change that we've seen, at least in my tenure as a Tableau Server person. It's got the whole switch over from TSM, and just excited to go through some of the nuances with you guys. If you guys have any questions as we go, feel free to post them in the chat. My colleague Matt is also online, and he'll help facilitate getting those answered. And we'll also try to save a few minutes at the end if you guys want to do some verbal Q&A, or open up the phones Fraser style. So without further ado, so first of all, I'm Tony Koss, Solutions Architect at Interworks. I'm a Tableau Server certified professional and the practice lead for Tableau Server here. And also on the call, we have Matt Hughes, and he is the platform practice lead, similar qualifications as myself. And just quick background on Interworks, we are Tableau Partner of the Year for US and EMEA. We work with a number of organizations throughout the world, and some of the largest Tableau Server deployments, and many smaller ones as well. So large background in Tableau Server. And we do support the whole analytics stack, is what we like to call it, from infrastructure on up through the data quality, analytics, enablement and training. And then, of course, overarching strategy, how do we actually plan and structure these projects? So before we get anywhere else, I want to make sure that if you remember nothing else, that we get through the takeaways. If you have to drop early or you fall asleep later, I want to make sure that you have at least these takeaways. So 2018.2 is not a straightforward upgrade. Like past upgrades, you can't just click the upgrade button and expect everything to work. The future upgrades will be better, and actually the process for doing that is more improved. But for this particular upgrade, when you're going from prior to .2 to .2 and future, it's gonna require some intervention here. So I want you to not take this lightly. There is a breaking change to your server automation scripts. The back-end process that runs these, Tab Admin, in the past is being replaced with TSM, Tableau Service Manager. And stay tuned for a nifty-gifty on that one. More than any other version, we don't recommend doing an in-place live production upgrade without testing it, first of all, but also potentially on the same hardware. So this is a good opportunity to spin up 2018.2 on a separate server, take a backup of your existing production cluster, and restore it to your new server. Test everything out, make sure it's working, make sure your integrations are working, and then either potentially take a new backup and ship that over and restore that one, or run the process on your current production server. But just don't take it lightly. Don't just click upgrade without running through a very detailed test. And finally, there's no more primary node on the installation. It's now called, the first one that you install, it's called an initial node, and that's where your licensing process runs. So there's still a distinction there, but the licensing process can actually be moved to a different node if there's a failure. So there's no more need for a backup primary. So that's great news. And I can't emphasize this enough. I love the Tableau Server documentation. It's awesome for trying to figure out the nuance and the step-by-step. And there's actually the TSM conversion checklist online. So if you just Google, what TSM upgrade for Tableau, that's going to pop up. And I just recommend that you familiarize yourself with the documentation before going through your own upgrade path. So we're going to primarily focus on this presentation on the TSM and process topology. But there are several other nuggets I wanted to throw in here and that we can't really ignore. So first of all, TSM. There is no more tab admin, only TSM. And TSM is not just a command line executable, but it is a REST API client that requires authentication. So that's nice because you can run it from anywhere, anywhere that you have access to that port. But you can't just substitute TSM for tab admin in your command line because there's an authentication process. If you've used a REST API before, you know there's a handshake that happens beforehand, and you have to authenticate yourself with the server. So there is a login and password required. You can't just run it straight from the command line. The syntax has also been changed for many of the commands. So you can't just do a TSM backup. You have to do TSM maintenance backup. So there's a different subclasses of scripts as well. There's a handy conversion documentation for this. Again, check out the documentation. That'll map the common TSM commands to, common tab admins commands to their to the correct TSM command for these versions going forward. Also, the set command, where we used to say tab admin set the variable, that is now going to be a key and value pair. So we'll say, you know, TSM configuration set. We'll give it the key that we want to set and then the value with the K and the V flags. There's no more tab admin config. It's now TSM pending changes apply, which makes more sense if you think about it. And then there's that link at the bottom for the mapping those tab admin to TSM commands. So then some of the notable impacts to your environment. So you're going to have any of those maintenance scripts that you have. So for your backup and cleanup that you're running, hopefully nightly, if not weekly. So those will need to be overhauled. You'll need to make sure that you are logging in, that you have a way to tell the server to log in, or to tell TSM to log in. And you'll need to make sure that you're also backing up the settings for your server, because the backup command no longer exports the server configuration settings. Those are saved separately by a different command, the TSM settings export. So you need to make sure that both of those commands are run so that you're saving all of your settings and data. And in line with that, if you restore a backup, it does not have your configuration information. So restoring a backup in place, if there are configuration changes, you need to make those first. So the new TSM comes with a new web application instead of the old configure Tableau Server utility. We're now operating in the browser, and so that runs off the port 8850 on the Tableau Server. It still requires local machine administration or administrator account or domain admin to run it. But once you're logged in and you're setting up the server, you have a new configuration interface. So you might remember these options from the configuration screen, but now they're a little bit more pretty. If you want to change the identity store later, you will need to just basically burn down what you have and start over. It's for real this time, 100% permanent to the installation as far as what identity provider that you select. So you'll want to just make sure that you have the correct option chosen from the start. So if you get an error while you're initializing or in the process of installation, there's a new script called obliterate. If you've messed around with the Linux version, you're familiar with this. That script will wipe out all traces of Tableau on your computer and allow you to start fresh. And so Tableau recommends that you run obliterate before installing again if you ever run into an error during this initialization phase. Otherwise, it's real sleek. It looks real cool, and enjoy the shiny there. So the status page is also available in TSM. So server and domain admins can see this. They don't have to be Tableau Server users and log in through the Tableau Web UI. They can see it right here in in TSM. For logs and maintenance, there is a GUI log backup in TSM now, and that has replaced the GUI log, the log export from the Tableau Server Web UI. So where you used to go on to the status page and export the logs, you'll now have to do that in TSM because it's gone from there. And of course, you're still able to do it from the command line with TSM maintenance zip logs, I believe. So the topology configuration, again, nice, new, and shiny. And if you're just deploying a distributed Tableau server, after you set up the initial node, you've got this download bootstrap file button here. So you'll want to download that and use that when you're setting up your additional nodes. You'll recognize the run as account. You can use the default as a network service, or you can provide your own. There's options that we would normally see in that configure utility, like external SSL. That's all done here in the web interface. Very nice. And one of the real cool features that they added is the ability to do trusted authentication here, set that up via the GUI. So you can go ahead and enable that here. And then as you move over to the trusted authentication tab, you can actually add those users, or add those hosts in here and manage them in a much more user-friendly way. I know we've got several servers with dozens of these, and so trying to manage the strings of trusted hosts can get unwieldy. So this is a much better interface for that. So thank you, Tableau. The manage product keys utility is gone. We now can do all that from the web interface here. And we can also have the ability to restart and stop Tableau Server from TSM. So you can do this remotely. You don't have to be logged into the server. So what else has changed? The installation directory. So you'll notice that the directory, the file paths have changed here. So where we used to have Tableau Server / the version / bin, now we have server / packages / bin.version, and that's the full version number. So every package is going to have a new directory. So every time you install, even a maintenance upgrade, if you go from 2018.2.1 to 2018.2.2, you're going to have a brand new set of folders here. But fortunately, TSM is now automatically added to path. So you don't have to necessarily change that in your scripts. You can just run TSM from wherever you are in the command prompt. So there's also a scripts directory. There's that obliterate script. Again, it's very nice to know where that lives. You can also just do TSM obliterate from anywhere as well. So why would they do this? Why have a different directory for each version? So this allows us to install multiple versions and switch between them with a lot less downtime. So you can do the installation of your upgrade version, towards the end of the workday or whatever, before your outage window. Make sure that that's installed, and then once your outage window begins, you're already 30 minutes, an hour into, you've already got those tasks completed. So it kind of reduces pressure there on those maintenance windows. You can take a little bit longer to make sure that everything's right and just how you want them to be. before your maintenance window actually starts. So it also allows for easier rollbacks because you don't have to completely uninstall and reinstall. You can just switch to the different version. So now what do these, are there any new processes, or what is this process? What do the process changes look like? So first of all, there's the hot topology feature. So that means that some processes can be removed or added while the service is running. So those two are the VizQL server and backgrounder. In a past blog post, I was talking about this is kind of like a zipper mobile that moves the lane barriers on the Bay Bridge. So it would give like the inbound city traffic for the morning commute more lanes, and then switch those, move the lane barriers over to give the evening outbound traffic more lanes. So that's the kind of the theory, or one of the use cases here for that. So you could, have, say, 5 nodes on your cluster, have 2 of those be backgrounders during the day, and then switch over and have 4 of those be backgrounders during the night to be able to crunch through all your extract refreshes or whatever you have going on. So this is also something that could be scripted as well. So there's the topology topology TSM commands, and then it's completely scriptable and schedulable. So very cool feature there. So if we wanted to do that, let's say change one VizQL, change from one VizQL server to 2 VizQL server processes, make the change in the dropdown, and then up at the top of the screen, there's the pending changes button, and you'll click on that, and it'll show you which changes are pending. See that we're going from 2 to 1, or sorry, from 1 to 2, and then we'll hit apply live changes. Tableau will show us the status screen as that's spinning up, and eventually, hopefully, the green checkbox comes up here for us. So cluster changes. If you're running a cluster, you now have a thing called a coordination service ensemble to think about. So if you're running 3 or more nodes, this is where you're going to want to actually add more coordination service processes. Tableau is not doing it for you automatically. That's the process that enables quorum. So like if 51, more than 50% of your nodes are online, then Tableau is going to stay online. That's the quorum piece. And then the way that we want to deploy that is in odd numbers. So we always want to have give ourselves a majority here. So 1, 3, and 5 to match the number of nodes in the cluster. So if you have more than 5 nodes in your cluster, you're still going to want to stop at 5, distributed throughout your nodes. The new process here is the client file service, and that manages the shared files across a multi-node cluster. And it's recommended to configure one of those client file service instances on each node where you've deployed those coordination service processes. The backup primary. So again, there's no more backup primary. So that's awesome. We can save a node. But the license service and the TSM controller are still there, just on the initial node, and they're kind of stuck. So we can't really do anything about that. It only runs on the initial node by default, and we can only run 1 instance per cluster. So that's not very high available, not very highly available. That's the word I'm looking for. So we're not able to distribute those tasks across the other nodes in the cluster. But if the initial node fails, we can move those over to another node. And that's recoverable by a script. But that still requires a full service restart. So what a roller coaster of emotions. It's better than it was, but it's still not to 100% of highly available expectations that we might hope for. So Task Manager, if you open up Task Manager on your Tableau server, what are you going to notice? That we kind of have this layer of obscurity over our Tableau server. We can't really see what's going on here. These details are available in Resource Monitor, though. You'll want to look at the process ID here to actually map those through. But you might come in here and go, hey, where'd all my underlying processes go? But that's where you'd actually find them. Postgres does still stand out on its own, though. So there is, with the later versions, they've moved to a single installer file. So when you run this, it'll give you the option of whether you are installing an initial node or if you're adding this to another cluster. It'll also show an option for an upgrade if it detects that there was previously or there's an existing installation of Tableau Server here. And one key point here is that we want to always take a backup prior to this now. So they brought in the automatic backup for a couple of years here and got us all used to that, and then they took it away. So now we're going to want to make sure that we're taking our own backup beforehand before we start the upgrade process here, just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, we have a recent backup we can go to. So if you guys aren't using SAML or SAML SCIM, then this won't really apply to you. But basically, it gives us kind of the Active Directory provisioning for local authentication with SAML. So if you've got an identity provider like Okta, then you can have some of the same benefits as what you might have with the Active Directory, as far as you don't have to provision the users in multiple places. It will automatically synchronize. So I'm going to go back through some of those key takeaways here. That hopefully you've seen here that it's not a straightforward upgrade, but the future upgrades will be more streamlined than before because we can do the install in place and then switch over to the different files or the different application when we're ready to cut over. And that our scripts are going to break. Anything that's using tab admin will not work after you upgrade. And then more than any other version, we really want to make sure that we're not just running this, that we're testing it first. So we always recommend testing your upgrades, not necessarily the maintenance upgrades as much, or at least our suggestion is less strong for that. But if any sort of minor or major version, excuse me, we want to make sure that we're spinning that up on a development box, restoring it back up, and making sure that everything works. So, and then finally, there's no more primary node. So again, we don't need a backup primary, and we went through the back and forth about whether or not it's a good thing to still have that license process stuck on that on the primary server, but having it movable. So there's still that tension there. Tableau does provide a script to run in case the initial node fails, but that doesn't quite make the high availability threshold in my book. So that's still an area where we need to use some caution and have a correct expectation of what the software will do for us. So, and again, I'll point to the documentation. All this, everything I've said today is in there. For the most part, I think that's where I do my research, and I recommend that you read up there as well. It's a lot of good stuff. It's written well. The steps are easy to follow. So I'd recommend that you guys all take a look at that before you upgrade. So we've put together, and when I say we, I mean I want to special shout out to Sid on our team. He has put together a maintenance script for these backups and cleanups. And I believe that's going to go live any minute now. So you might not have to wait for next week for that. But the big challenge with this is that because TSM is a REST API, it requires a username and password. And if we have our username and password written right into the script, then we're storing passwords in plain text, and we're back to a safe, high unsecurity. So this has a method in it that will allow you to encrypt and store the password in an encrypted format, and then get rid of the plain text password. So that way TSM is able to use an encrypted file to log into to log into the Tableau server and actually perform the maintenance tasks. So I do want to open it up to Q&A. Matt, if there's any questions going on that we'd like to talk about, or if there's any of you would like to ask any questions verbally, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and we can have the discussion that way.
So I think Dan Gerard had a question about killing runaway processes. For example, a background job that is that's long running and needs to be killed. So he's asking if there's any improvements to that process.
There is an API for that now, or it is available in the API. I think it's through the REST API, not TSM. I could be wrong, but there's at least a way to get a list of jobs as far as matching that up to maybe where the one that is actually running away, knowing which one's running away. You could probably make an interface for that, and that's not something I'm aware of that exists within Tableau as it stands, but seems possible to do. So I'd be interested definitely to hear more about maybe how you would define a runaway process, if that's a manual intervention, or you just know from this server admin or something, or like a SQL database admin, that hey, this process is running away, we need to kill it. So then how do I go locate that process? Definitely want to follow up with you on that.
Yeah, to add to that, there is functionality now to kill a background task or a currently running background job through the REST API. I don't think it's available through TSM. So that would probably be the better option. So you can query those running through the REST API and then kill those there. I did just confirm those are in the current version of the REST API underneath the background job section.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be nice to write a little web app for that. Anybody else have questions or anything waiting in the queue here? Cool. Well, we can leave it open for a couple more minutes if you guys think of anything else. But otherwise, that's all I have for you guys today. Really appreciate you guys joining, and let me know if in the future if you have any questions. Email is tony.kau, K-A-U, @interworks.com. Feel free to reach out direct, or there's a contact us page on Interworks as well. That works just as well. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.